Okay, so I'll get started here. So thanks again for joining us this evening. This workshop that we're hosting tonight is entitled Housing: What Can Towns Do? Um, WRC hosts a series of informational land use planning workshops and trainings every spring. And so this is the final workshop in that series. We held one about implementation strategies for town plans, and then another one last night about due process and making effective land use decisions. So we're recording all the workshops and posting slides on our website. So if you weren't able to attend ones that we've held, those will be up on our website. So just for introductions, before we get started, my name is Matt Bachler. I am a senior planner at the Wyndham Regional Commission. And Sue, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, yeah. I'm Sue Westa, Associate Director of the Regional at the Wyndham Regional Commission. I focus on community development, so a lot of housing things.
So I'll start us off with a presentation. Just to note too, I see many people in the attendees list have just made a note of what town they're representing, if they are representing a town. So if during the presentation, if you can just take a minute and indicate if you're representing a town within our region. These trainings are part of our core funding from the Agency of Commerce and Community Development, and just in our grant reporting, we do need to keep track of which towns attend these meetings. So just as you have time, if you wouldn't mind doing that. So. I'll get started here. We have a relatively short presentation, and then we'll take questions and have a discussion as well. So I'm just going to turn off my video as I go through the presentation. Um, so we wanted to host this workshop about what towns can do about housing for a number of different reasons. I think we all know that there is a statewide housing crisis and a very urgent need to provide additional housing to help bring down housing costs. But there are limitations to what towns can actually do to help facilitate the development of housing. So there's a lot of other factors that influence this, including economic conditions and um, economic conditions and market conditions. So we really wanted to focus on just the basics of what towns can actually do to help support housing. Another reason we wanted to hold the session this spring is, I think as many of you know, Wyndham Regional Commission is in the process of updating their regional plan to meet new Act 181 requirements. Act 181 was passed in 2024, and one of the requirements in that legislation is for regional planning commissions to take housing targets developed by the Vermont Housing Finance Agency at the regional level. And those housing targets are shown on the screen here for the Wyndham region. Um, and to disaggregate those down to the municipal level as well, so that collectively the towns in our region are achieving these region-wide housing goals. So for the Wyndham region, you can see there's a range for housing targets, both looking out to 2030 and to 2050. And the range is based on different growth assumptions that Vermont Housing used in developing these targets. So for 2030 on the lower range, they were targeting about 2,500 units, and then in the upper range, about 3,700 units. And then looking further out to 2050, quite a bit more needed for housing, not surprisingly. about 8,000 units at the lower range to over 15,000 units at the upper range. And again, these are based on different population growth assumptions. These numbers also take into account that we have a current deficit um, in terms of the number of housing units we have available on the market. So some of the units shown here are just needed to get us to a point where we have a healthier, more affordable housing market. So it's not even keeping up with current and expected growth and demand. It's just getting us to a better baseline. So as I mentioned, we were required to create local housing targets for each town. Um, as we've been working on our regional plan update, one of the main focuses is on updating our regional future land use map, and we've been meeting with each town in the region to review that draft map and then also go over the local housing targets. The housing targets, both for the Planning Commission, Regional Planning Commission, and for our municipalities, they're only for planning purposes. So it's really meant to demonstrate the need for housing, and it sets a goal for all of us to work towards, but there's not a requirement that we as a region or towns achieve these housing target goals. But another reason why we wanted to host this workshop just about what towns can do is, the housing target numbers for the region and for many towns are pretty significant. So I think it's just trying to help towns understand, okay, what can they realistically do to help meet these goals. And just for those that might be less familiar with Wyndham Regional Commission and our role when it comes to supporting housing and how towns think about housing and encouraging housing, one of the primary services we provide to communities is technical assistance. So we assist with zoning bylaw updates and town plan updates, and we'll talk about these in more detail in a few slides. We help with infrastructure planning and engagement, um, compliance with new legislation. So, example, the Home Act in 2023 created changes in statute requiring towns to update zoning bylaws to help encourage more housing. We manage a brownfield program, which provides funding to properties that have potential environmental contamination concerns and for doing cleanup work to help projects get ready for housing development. On the bottom of this slide, the two images on the left and in the center are housing projects in our region that utilize the brownfield funding. So on the left is the Red Clover Commons project in Brattleboro by the high school. And in the center is the garage project in Bellows Falls. So both of those went received funding through that program we manage. We also help towns with doing new village planning, comprehensive village planning, visualizing infill development. So the image on the lower right-hand side is an example of a um, infill plan for the town of Putney that was done several years ago. So that's just some examples of the assistance we provide as an RPC. And next, Sue is going to talk about some more specific projects that we've worked on recently related to housing. And Sue, I can advance the slides. Just let me know when you want me to move ahead.
Absolutely. Thank you. So from time to time, the Wyndham Regional Commission has had the opportunity to work with universities or other partners on special projects. And in this example that is highlighted, the Four Town Housing Collaborative is a project that we worked on a couple years ago with UMass and the American Institute of Architecture Foundation. and it looked at housing opportunities in four towns in the northwest corner of our region in Jamaica, Londonderry, Winhall, and Weston. This project included community engagement, and the final reports and presentations from those are posted on our WRC website on I believe it's the documents web page. And, working with students, it's more affordable. It can offer some really creative solutions and a lot of enthusiasm, although their solutions might not always be 100% realistic. They are really good at thinking outside of the box. And so, you know, this is a good opportunity that we have been taking advantage of over recent years. Next slide, Matt. Yeah, and this example here is just one of the housing infill projects that was developed by the American Institute of Architecture team. At the time, this is a Jamaica school site. Uh, it had just been announced that the Jamaica school might be closing, and so it was on everybody's mind. And it's a nice site because it's located in the village, and it has a significant amount of land. There's 6.5 acres there. Next slide, Matt. And so this quick site plan that they did showed how on that school site, new townhouses or condos could be developed, apartments, really a new neighborhood. It also includes senior housing, daycare, community space, a little green space, and a playground area. Of course, sewer and water infrastructure would be required to make this happen. Either a new village system, which many towns are looking at right now, or on a site of this size, you might be able to find a space on site for a community system, especially if it wasn't fully developed like this. But this just shows you one example, and there are more in the reports that are online if you're interested. Next slide, Matt. And so what can towns really do? And that is what this is all about today. And this is a summary of some of the actions. We're going to get into more details on each of these. So towns can help develop infrastructure, either find grants to do that or some funding sources that can help to develop infrastructure that would serve new housing. Towns can also provide land. Sometimes towns have excess land available or funding, not complete funding for a project, but partial funding or for specific parts of it, maybe pre-development. Towns can also update their zoning laws to make them more housing friendly where it makes sense. They can build consensus by educating their community and the leadership of communities. Intermunicipal conversations can also be useful, and of course, sharing resources from the state and others. Above all, the most important thing really is to focus on growing compact settlement away from flood hazards and thinking about how to incorporate infrastructure in the future. But as Matt noted before, no one really expects towns to become housing developers. And now I think it's back to you, Matt.
Yeah, thanks, Sue. So I'm
Mhm.
gonna start walking through some of these different kind of areas that Sue was mentioning that towns can focus on. So the first one is infrastructure planning and funding. So I think we all know that infrastructure is needed to support any type of development. We talk a lot about the need for water and wastewater, but that's also the basic infrastructure of roads and electricity and increasingly access to broadband internet. So There's a lot of different types of infrastructure that are needed to be in place to support housing development. But when we're talking about supporting higher levels of housing density, which really helps bring down the overall cost of a project when you look at it at a per unit basis, it really is necessary to have public water and wastewater just to keep project costs down and to reduce the size of land that's needed. Um, and it just makes the project more feasible. Public water and wastewater is also needed in many of our existing historic village centers as well that don't have the infrastructure because we have many properties that have older on-site septic systems or a drilled well where there might be conflicts in terms of how close a septic system is to a well. Also, because we have a lot of more compact properties on small lots. If those septic systems fail, it can be very difficult or impossible to find an area on the property to replace them. So I think it's important to think about water and wastewater as needed to support future growth and development, but also just to sustain what we have in our villages as well. So for towns wanting to undertake planning for infrastructure funding, um, these projects are obviously multi-year, very expensive projects if a town does not have this infrastructure in place already. Many of our towns in the region do not have water or wastewater infrastructure. Typically, you would start off this process by doing a preliminary engineering report, which is a kind of lower cost entry into the process to help define what the problem is, gather community input, and build interest and support for the project, and then to identify the preferred solution and provide funding options. Often, too for towns that are pursuing grant funding for this type of infrastructure, having a preliminary engineering report is really necessary to apply for larger grants that will cover engineering and construction costs. Um, it's still an investment for a town to do that preliminary engineering report, but
I'm
it
not.
really
Go ahead.
helps set the basis for pursuing additional funding. These projects can be very expensive. I see Patty on the call from Londonderry, and Londonderry is a community that's working on village wastewater systems for both the South and North Village in Londonderry. And the South Village project is currently just about to start construction, which is very exciting, and that's been a multi-year process. Londonderry was able to receive funding through the ARPA program a couple years ago and received a little more than $4 million for the for both of those projects. So just to give you a kind of a sense of the scale of these projects, they are quite expensive. So I think um, towns need to plan for looking into grant opportunities to help offset those costs, especially for smaller towns. $4 million is a very big investment without that grant support. So unfortunately, the ARPA funding was a one-time funding opportunity, but there are funding opportunities for these types of projects through the Northern Borders Regional Commission. um, the state also has the Clean Water Revolving Loan Fund, which helps provide very low interest loans for communities to help build these systems. And there's other federal and state sources available as well. I did want to mention too, I won't go into too much detail about the new CHIP program, the Community Housing Infrastructure Program that was enacted, I think 2 years ago now. Um, this is a new funding program. that it provides project-based tax increment financing for infrastructure improvements. So that includes wastewater and water, but it also includes extending municipal roads to a property as well. Um, so just broadly with the CHIP program, how that works is that a developer would work with a town. So the town has to be taking the lead on the application for the CHIP program, but they would be working with a developer. The developer would have a proposal in mind for development, um, and if they needed infrastructure extended to make that development happen. So if it was a property just outside of where a wastewater line terminates, they would be able to, through the CHIP program, receive funding to extend that wastewater line to service the new property. And then the town would repay the cost associated with that by collecting the new property tax revenue generated from that new development. So the town would still continue to collect the property taxes that existed before the development happened, but the additional revenue coming in from that new investment in the property would go towards repaying that infrastructure cost. And then when the infrastructure costs are paid off, then the town would collect the full property tax from that property. So um, it's a complicated program, so that's a very brief summary. Just to note, if you are interested in the CHIP program, Vermont League of Cities and Towns has been doing some great webinars about the program, and I'm pretty sure that information is available on their website. They also have staff at VLCT specifically helping towns that are interested in CHIP. So there's a lot more to be said about it, but definitely contact VLCT if you're interested in learning more about that. Um, for housing development costs, as I mentioned, there are always economic and market conditions that are influencing when and where and how housing is built, and we can't control the larger economy that's impacting that. But towns can help reduce development costs in a few ways. So if your town has municipal land, excess municipal land that's not currently being used, and may be a good site for housing. A community can provide that municipal land to a developer at a reduced cost or at no cost. Towns can also control the process for how development happens on that land through doing preliminary planning, doing an RFP. So it's not as if the town is just handing over land and then not controlling what gets developed there. So there's a way for a town to ensure that they get the type of housing that's needed for their community through offering that land to a developer. Towns can establish local revolving loan funds to help cover pre-development costs, to help with housing rehabilitation. So that's something that you can set up just through the town meeting process and then commit funding on a regular basis to that type of dedicated fund, and then just manage that at the local level. Towns can do tax stabilization or tax reduction. And then also towns themselves, many towns have set up housing committees in recent years, and housing committees are a great entity to help provide information to residents about different state incentives. So there's the VHIP, Vermont Housing Improvement Program, managed through Wyndham Windsor Housing Trust, and then also Green Mountain Home Repair managed by Wyndham Windsor Housing Trust. So just kind of raising awareness of those funding programs through the state because those are programs that can help reduce housing development costs. Then the biggest thing I think that towns can do to support housing is making sure that their zoning bylaws are up to date, to encourage housing in the areas where um, it's best suited and where they want to see growth and development. Your local land use regulations really kind of set the table in terms of the types of housing that can be developed in your community. Often we adopt zoning bylaws and it will be many, many years until we go back and update them. So I think just regularly reviewing zoning, making sure it's up to date, um, taking into consideration where you have infrastructure in town that can support more housing growth and development. The other thing just to keep in mind too is with updating zoning to encourage more growth and development, that's also going to increase property values, which just help support the town's grand list. So, um, wanting to make sure that we're preserving natural areas and resource areas in town, but in those areas that can support higher intensity development, loosening zoning regulations so that you're really taking full advantage of the infrastructure that you have. Some of the easiest things to do are just making sure you don't have very restrictive limits on density, so the number of dwelling units that can be built on a lot. Sometimes those numbers are very low, and there are other just natural things that are going to limit how much development can occur. A lot of that is dictated by the availability of infrastructure. Also looking at the dimensional requirements for lots. For our villages, many of the existing properties in our villages are very small, but sometimes the zoning is not consistent with the existing development patterns. So making sure that you allow for smaller lot sizes within your compact village areas. And then allowing for a greater variety of housing types too. So making sure you're supporting accessory dwelling units, two-family homes, three, four, five-family homes. Um, and then towns can also consider incentives to encourage certain types of housing. So you can include density bonuses for affordable housing, so allowing a developer to build at a higher density if they provide a certain number of affordable housing units. Um, so it's also important to look at the procedures that you have in town for reviewing and approving proposals for housing. So there's the substance in your zoning bylaws, but then there's also the process. And so towns can help make it easier to review and permit housing to make it a quicker process for developers and to reduce uncertainty of whether or not a developer is going to get approval for what they're proposing. Just for example, many towns will require a conditional use permit for buildings that include three or more units. So that could be relaxed to allow smaller multifamily buildings as a permitted use within a village area versus as a conditional use. A conditional use requires a separate public hearing and review process by a DRB or a zoning board. If it's a permitted use, it's something that the zoning administrator might just be able to issue a zoning permit for. So that speeds up the process. You can also allow for administrative approval for smaller housing projects. So similar to that, just making it easier for a zoning administrator to approve projects where it makes sense and that additional level of review is not needed by a DRB. And again, this is all about just reducing uncertainty and making the approval process easier for a property owner. And I think with that, I think Sue is going to next talk about building consensus.
Yes. Yes. So, of course, it's important for communities to understand the need for housing and to build consensus around that. One of the key issues is that most households today are smaller than when most of the homes in our region were built. And so, most households today are one and two people households, and we have an aging population, and most homes in Vermont were built for larger families. So that's just one important piece of the information that should be shared, not only with the general public, but with your town leaders. And Matt already mentioned that one great way to do that is with a local housing committee or commission. I put Londonderry up here again because they've done a great job with that. And they've done a number of things, including, working with other committees, commissions in town to pursue housing goals. And they also provide housing resource information on the town website. Next slide, Matt. Another good thing to do is to talk to your neighbors. Not all towns are suited for new development, and that may be because of floodplains or other environmental limitations or lack of infrastructure. And you may be able to cooperate with your neighbors on solutions that meet both your needs. One good example of this is the towns of Dover and Wilmington, who partnered on the Bytown, and they have developed and met for multiple years as a Bytown housing committee. Early on, they were able to pool their funding to hire a consultant to develop a housing needs analysis and plan. And they have a website, Deerfield Valley Housing, where that they use to provide a lot of information. Some that I'll be talking about in a minute, but also they post information about rental properties and all kinds of things that they're trying to connect their residents with. Next slide, Matt. So again, it's important to share available resources, and the state of Vermont has done a really good job at developing a lot of information to help communities, developers, and residents think about housing development at various scales. A couple years ago, they developed a toolkit that walks you through the development process, and it's designed for small scale developers and focuses on infill housing. That's the Homes for All toolkit. And they've also been holding periodic trainings around the state. And there's an upcoming training in Brattleboro next week. A newer thing that the state is working on is called 802 Homes. And this is going to be a catalog of ready to build home plans that should work for infill development in many of our communities. They are currently working with four development ready communities and to work through this process and figure out exactly how it's going to work. The closest community to us that they're working with as a pilot is Manchester. So you might want to go to it's the ACCD website. You can see that at the bottom of this page. Even if you Googled 802 Homes or Homes for All Vermont, you would get to their web page, and these images are just some examples from their guide. Next slide, Matt. And again, the Wyndham Regional Commission periodically has time to work with or opportunity to work with partners and universities to develop new resources And we most recently worked with a Conway school, that's this image on the right, to consider housing opportunities within villages and outside of floodplains and how that could work. And they have some really nice examples there. Another more recent project was with UMass. We worked with in the Deerfield Valley with four towns, Wilmington, Dover, Reedsboro, and Whitingham. And that project resulted in multiple guides and also a game that helps folks understand the implications of housing development. And we have that game in our office. If you're ever interested and would like to share it with your planning commission or others, we would be happy to work with you on that. Um, all of this information is available on the Wyndham Regional Commission's website, but also the Deerfield Project has its own website called Deerfield Valley Rise. And finally, we do presentations like this and have recordings and post slides on our website from time to time. And most and those related to housing would be on our community development webpage. I think it's back to you, Matt.
Yeah, and the last thing I was going to talk about was Act 250 exemptions and the state designation program. Many of you might be familiar with this information just from our recent meetings with towns throughout the region about Act 181 and the changes that were made to the Act 250 program and the state designation program. But this is important to keep in mind just in thinking about encouraging development of housing in your communities. So just as a reminder, Act 250 is the statewide permitting program for land development that's been in place in Vermont for over 50 years now. Um, it does represent another layer of review and approval for certain housing projects, depending on the size of the housing project, in addition to local regulations if the town has zoning bylaws. Act 250 has had a lot of benefits just in preserving and protecting the qualities of Vermont that we all appreciate. But it is another layer of review. For a developer, it does present an additional cost and some uncertainty potentially about whether a project will both receive approval at the municipal level and the state level. Act 181 passed in 2024, and it creates two types of exemptions from that Act 250 permit requirement. Tier 1A provides full exemption from Act 250 permitting. That would include all types of projects. And then Tier 1B is just related to housing. That exempts housing related projects with up to a maximum of 50 dwelling units on 10 acres of land or less. Um, there's criteria in statute for whether a town qualifies for Tier 1A or Tier 1B. One of the requirements has to do with how Wyndham Regional has been doing its regional future land use mapping. So these areas need to be within a village or downtown center or planned growth or village area. The exemption is really for our existing compact settlement areas and areas immediately around that have the infrastructure in place to support that type of development. There are also requirements about towns having adequate local land use regulations. Because just wanting to make sure that there is that review process at the local level if an Act 250 permit is not required. And in our region, it is just a limited number of towns that qualify for Tier 1B or Tier 1A. Part of the challenge is we have limited water and wastewater infrastructure. Another requirement is that towns need to have zoning bylaws and subdivision bylaws. And it's really just a handful of towns that have both of those zoning and subdivision bylaws currently. Um, it's important to note too that although Wyndham Regional Commission is going through the process of updating their regional plan now, and through this process, we are doing our regional mapping, which helps determine eligibility for the Tier 1 exemptions. There is a process for us to work with towns after our plan is adopted to um, make amendments to our regional land use map and to help towns go through the application process for Tier 1A or Tier 1B. So that this will be an ongoing process even after our plan is adopted to help towns apply for that if they would like to after our plan is adopted. So Act 181 also makes changes to the state designation program. Most of our towns have at least one designated village center through the state designation program. That program is now reformed, so there are just two types of designations. There are centers and neighborhoods. So if your community has an existing village center, that automatically transfers over to the new center designation. Neighborhood development areas automatically transfer over to the new neighborhood designation. Going forward, eligibility in the state designation program, part of that is based on our regional land use map. So if we map areas as a village center or downtown center, those all become centers. And areas we map as planned growth or village area become neighborhoods. So for the state designation program, it is connected with helping to encourage housing. So through that program, if your town is enrolled, there is affordable housing funding priority for communities that participate in that program. There is state water and wastewater fee reductions, and then there are also property tax benefits for rehabilitation work, and that includes commercial rental properties within those designated areas. Um, so being included in that designation program has benefits for potentially reducing housing costs as well. And I think that is the final slide. So we covered a lot of information. And happy to answer any questions or go back to any slides that we covered. Uh, yep, go ahead, Wyndham Town.
Hi, it's Kathy
Hi,
Thales.
Kathy.
Matt, do you or Sue know of any towns that have done like a cluster septic system or almost like a mini treatment plant? Like it's not feasible. Wyndham is, 19 miles long. We don't have any water septic shared water, wastewater treatment. But, looking at what you could do with a model that maybe is somewhere between 20 to 30 households using some type of cluster septic or mini treatment. Have you seen that yet?
Yeah, so the project in Londonderry is similar to that. The community wastewater projects that are going in South Londonderry and North Londonderry. So those projects will collect wastewater from properties within the villages, and then that wastewater goes to a central um, treatment and infiltration site. So essentially, it's kind of a large scale um, kind of septic system you would see on a private property just serving a single house. But it's collecting all of it and allowing for that treatment to happen at a much larger treatment site outside of the immediate village area. So that's one example for kind of like a municipal village-wide uh, cluster treatment, but it's not uncommon for that type of system to be developed for like a smaller scale residential subdivision. Like for if something's being done as like a planned unit development, where you have properties that are more clustered and centered on one portion of the property. Um, those properties can also share a communal septic system. I mean, that might be a smaller scale of, half a dozen to a dozen homes. But there are examples of that. But for a kind of a communal system going in for a PUD, that would more likely be done by the developer and then managed by a homeowners association versus the system in Londonderry will be a municipal system.
Yeah. Yeah, we were talking more about the latter than the former. I mean, something at a much smaller level, like, I don't know, six
Yeah.
units, 10 units, something like that.
Mhm. Yep. That can be done, Kathy.
Thank you.
Let's see. Stanley, did you have a question?
Well, it was a comment regarding Kathy's question.
Mhm.
When I was doing real estate appraisals, there were two developments in Vernon that were constructed by Sosimo Industries, or a division of Sosimo Lumber. They were multi-lot developments. One was off of Pond Road. I think it was the second left off the Pond Road once you go under the railroad underpass. I forget the name of the development. And there was another one in the southern part of Vernon. I believe it was north of Pond Road. If you go past the community center in Guilford in Vernon on Pond Road, the very first left cuts over to Route 142. And on the east end of that road is, I don't know, 15 or 20 houses. In both of those developments, the developer created a large lot. It was probably two, maybe three times the size of the average lot in that development. And it served as the community septic system. I believe the homeowners had a small committee that oversaw its maintenance and upkeep. The annual fees were minimal. It worked out very well for both of those developments. So it works. It does exist. I'm not aware of other developments that have that, but although I know the same developer did create two other similar developments in Wardsboro, which probably had the same
Hmm.
workup, I think. And everyone was in their deed provided access to the community septic system. So it looks like it was an easy thing that he did years ago, 20, 30 years ago to be specific. So I assume it can be done currently and elsewhere. Thank you.
Thanks, Stanley. Patty, did you have a question?
Yeah, I had a question about neighborhoods a little bit more. We're going through the bylaw update process, and there's a new area called Village Residential. And we are looking to expand that area outside of the boundaries of our existing village center, which I guess we do have a qualification for. So wanted to ask, would that potentially fit into something like that, fit into this neighborhood designation that you spoke of? What are some of the requirements, or what are they looking for there?
Yeah, so I think that would fit in. I know, and I because there's a lot of different layers with Act 181. One of the one of the requirements, so for the neighborhood designation, Wyndham Regional needs to map the area either as a village area or planned growth area. And one of the requirements, I know we've talked about this, one of the requirements is that a town has to have subdivision bylaws. And I know Londonderry is working
Mhm.
towards that with the
Yeah,
current update you're working on. So
yeah.
once that zoning is adopted, including the subdivision regulations, then I would say we'd have to just take a look at it, but I would guess that most of that village area we could map as um, probably village area will make more sense than planned
Mhm.
growth area. But then you would be included in that neighborhood designation. It's a question of when the bylaws get adopted by the town as it relates to when we are submitting our final plan for approval. Because
Right.
we need to submit our regional plan by the end of this year, and we're currently in the first draft of the plan and holding a public hearing in August. But like I said too, even if the zoning happens after we've adopted our plan, there is a process for us to just amend our map based on the work that Londonderry's done to update our map to show more village area. And then once we show an area as village area, it automatically gets included in the neighborhood designation. So,
Okay.
so I think it's just something for us to stay in communication about as we work on our
Yeah.
process and Londonderry works on their process.
Yeah, we're certainly advocating for that.
Yeah.
One of the big wins we hope that will go through is allowing multifamily units in this village residential area,
Mhm.
Great.
um, which took some effort. But we're hopeful it sticks and stays in there.
Yeah, that's great to hear. Um, Bert, did you have a question?
Yes, thank you. I'm a part of a voluntary group in Putney trying to improve the housing availability called the Housing Task Force in Putney. And there are two things that I'd like to know if you have any further comments or examples, perhaps from other towns. And that would be the loan funds. If you have other examples, if you have examples of successful loan funds in other towns, and what other towns have actually had results in tax stabilization and reduction as another way of easing the pain for new builders. Because sometimes I've heard a lot lately, for instance, about okay, I redo my building. I'm going to expect a little bit more rent, but then the taxes are going to double.
Right.
So, so it all makes it harder for me to do. So tax incentives of some sort seem to make sense to me. But are there towns that have actually done that?
Yeah. Sue, are you aware of?
I
Jones?
I believe that Wilmington may have done that, so what I'm not clear on is for what kind of projects, because some towns just do it for economic development, and some towns do it for residential, as well. Brattleboro has some sort of tax stabilization too, but we can look into that more for you, certainly, um, and find out which ones have done that.
Yeah,
That'd be a, that'd be a great help because we need templates if we're going to be doing that in Putney. It'd be helpful to have other towns that have done it successfully.
Right. Yeah.
yeah, for a loan fund, I think does Wilmington have some type of revolving
Uh,
loan or
I believe they might,
yeah,
but I'd have to double check on that as
yeah,
well.
A lot of towns have revolving loan funds that seem to be focused more on economic development.
yeah,
A lot
Housing.
often, yeah.
I know Rockingham may have some attempt to that way in that way too. But
yeah.
um, if
I
there are other
see
examples, I'd like to know.
right now, I just see Shannon Wheeler from Dover, the economic development person there, noted that they have tax stabilization, but nobody ever uses it, she says.
Mhm. Yeah.
So that can happen too.
Yeah. And I think Patty does Londonderry. I forget if Londonderry
Yeah,
did. Yeah.
London, the town gave the community fund for Londonderry, which is a nonprofit, it gave them some ARPA money,
Mhm.
$50,000, and it was voted on at town meeting to appropriate that money. So we do have a nonprofit that has a revolving loan fund, and one of the groups I'm involved with, we did use it to construct a house. It was super handy because, as you know, you don't get a lot of grant money until after the project's done, which is backwards, but
Yeah.
I recognize they want to make sure it's done. So that revolving loan fund was a bridge loan for us to get the project done. And it was huge. So yeah, it could be a nonprofit. Some towns, I don't know if they want to get into something like that.
Yeah.
I get it. We're a little bit more hesitant, I think.
Yeah, but Bert, if you want to reach out to us, where we can look into other examples and get back to the group in Putney.
Thank you. Yeah.
And Edie, did you have a question or comment?
I did. I just wanted to note Halifax being so small, I think really we might be looking at some ideas in my head lately of redevelopment of vacant properties. One of the reports that Wyndham Regional Commission did said we have a high number of those. And I just wanted to make a note, if it's helpful to any of the other communities, that Halifax is a member of like a tri-town housing rehabilitation committee that is a revolving loan fund that will help people repair a septic or a roof or that sort of thing. And it's one of those things I just wish we could get people to use a little bit more. So but another potential idea for folks that's not of the same scale for many towns, but potentially useful nonetheless.
Great.
Matt, can I chime in on that?
Sure.
Yeah, we started doing an inventory of vacant and or falling down homes. And there was a resource out at University of Vermont that's been super helpful. We're thinking about some type of incentive to move the property owners along on their homes to make it a win-win.
Mm-hmm.
But right now we've just mapped out where properties are and who owns them, that type of thing.
Yeah.
And then the next question is, that's the public part of it is, would you like to do something with this parcel?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's helpful. Do you mind sharing I think you said the resource, it was UVM?
Yes, it's and Stu, you might recognize this person. She's in the Southeast Vermont Housing Coalition. She's based in Guilford. I don't have her name. I'll pass it on to you, Matt, separately. But her whole line of work is looking at abandoned and or falling down homes.
Okay. Good to know. Okay. Let's see. Are there any other questions? And as we mentioned too,
Okay.
Wyndham Regional, we're here as a resource. So as questions come up, please feel free to reach out to us, and we might not know the answer right away, but we'll definitely get back to you and can provide examples and things like that. So I'll stop sharing that. So if there aren't any more questions, so thank you all for attending, and hope everyone enjoys the lovely evening.
Thank you.
Thank you for putting this on. Yeah.
Welcome.
Yeah. Good to see you all.
Thanks, Matt.
Have a
Thanks,
good
Sue.
You're welcome.
Bye, everyone.